Okay, and we're live. Not really, we're recording, but welcome to Piscean's Genius Astrology Stories, Volume 1. I'm going to go over a few different tabs. There's 32 tabs in total in this entire document. So, in this video, first we're going to go over my advanced astrological advisors and health specialties, also known as AAAHS. And I did a few of these. First, we're going to talk about field reports on exogenous testosterone administration in genetic females, natal charts XX. Primary concern is short-term use 1 month through 2 years, and permanent use 3 to 10 or more years. Somatic and sidereal alterations with projected detransition morbidity waves. This report is compiled by the collective subdepartments of celestial somatology, chronoendocrinology, and astropharmacognosy. So next we're going to go over theoretical nosology and sidereal pathogenesis of neomorbidities arising from the post-collapse Anthropocene with proposed astrotherapeutic solutions. And this report is compiled by the collective subdepartments of apocalyptic etiology, astrogenetic drift, and planetary pharmacopoeia. And this we can spice up right now together. We're going to be going over field reports on psychoactive substances, cannabis, the Neptunian dissolvent, and ethanol, also known as alcohol, the Venusian corrosive, in the altered biosphere. This report is compiled by the collective subdepartments of psychotropic astrochemistry, somatospiritual toxicology, and ritual substance integration, and so on. Now, not all the tabs are like this, but you'll see that in later content. So first, we're going to talk about what I said earlier, a few seconds ago, field reports on exogenous testosterone administration in genetic females. As someone that was personally on testosterone gel for 7 months. So first, we're going to get into the executive sidereal summary. So the Great Conjunction of 2020. Jupiter, Saturn, and Aquarius initiated a societal and medical paradigm of corporeal autonomy leading to widespread hormonal realignment practices. By the 2040s, the retrograde Saturn and Pisces epoch revealed systemic consequences. A surge in detransitioners, souls whose natal chart vitality is in profound disharmony with their altered corporeal vessel. Our astromedical analysis, cross-referenced with the Plutonic death rebirth cycles of 2044 and 2078, predicts catastrophic health collapses in this population, necessitating this advanced field guide for scholar doctors of the new era. Here's our departmental field reports. First, we have the subdepartment of celestial somatology and morphological alchemy. Here's a report on short-term alterations, 1 to 12 months. As you notice with me, there's vocal apparatus governed by Mercury in the 3rd house. Rapid thickening of vocal folds begins at 4 to 6 weeks. So Mercury retrograde periods observed to cause uneven maturation, leading to vocal fry, instability, and increased risk of astronodular formation, psychosomatic lesions tied to thwarted communication. Pilosecretory systems governed by Mars in the 1st house, vellus to terminal hair conversion in androgen-sensitive zones, face, abdomen, onset 2 to 4 months. Important growth patterns follow the natal Mars signs, elemental quality, fire signs, rapid, coarse, water signs, finer, but denser in follicular clustering. Dermal and subcutaneous layers governed by Venus in the 2nd house. Sebum viscosity increases by 300%, altering the acidic mantle of the skin. During squares of Venus, Saturn, patients report severe cystic acne, interpreted as a terrain rebellion. The Venus-ruled tissue rejecting Mars-ruled chemical influx. Here's a report on permanent long-term alterations, 3 to 10 or more years. Skeletal remodeling, governed by Saturn in the 10th house. After 5 or more years, irreversible changes noted: average prominence, mandibular squareness, increased bone density in certain asterisms. However, Saturnine burden manifests as premature calcium leaching in later life, post 45 biological age, especially in those with natal Saturn in Libra or the 6th house, signifying inherent structural compromise. Craniosacral, craniosacral and vocal permanent. So vocal drop is permanent after 12 to 8 months, but I beg to differ, even 7 months or less, because I can tell with myself. So even upon secession, the mercurial lament, a chronic untreatable hoarseness, occurs in 22% of long-term users linked to natal Mercury in fall, Pisces, Sagittarius, which I already had in my natal chart prior to any of this. Of course, I was born with this placement in Pisces, not Sagittarius. Now let's get into the sub-department of chronoendocrinology and visceral astrology. Here's a report on short-term alterations. The cardiac muscle, also known as your heart, which is very important, governed by the sun in the 4th house, within 1 month, just 1 month, increased erythrocytosis raises hematocrit, straining the solar engine. Tachycardia and hypertension are common. In charts where the sun squares Pluto, we observe early onset plutonic hypertension resistant to standard treatment, presaging future crises. So I don't know how medical doctors are getting away with this. Hepatic and renal filters, governed by Jupiter, 8th house, and Venus, 7th house. Injectables, esterified tea, place immediate burden on hepatic detox pathways. Gel users show faster Jupiterian expansion of lipid profiles, triglycerides, and LDL. The house position of Jupiter predicts susceptibility. Jupiter in the 6th house of illness shows 80% higher risk of fatty liver disease. Wow. The things we can do with astrology and AI, we're living in the future, folks. I'm predicting exactly what's going to happen. So here's a report on permanent long-term alterations. Cardiomyopathy and the solar infarction. So after 7 or more years, the heart muscle exhibits hypertrophic remodeling, not from athleticism, but from chronic sidereal strain. Mortality from acute myocardial infarction spikes in this population during solar eclipses, activating their natal 4th or 8th houses. The heart becomes a Sun and Scorpio organ, powerful but prone to sudden head failure. Reproductive system atrophy, governed by the moon in the 5th house. Ovarian suppression leads to permanent lunar desiccation within 2 to 5 years. Uterine atrophy, endometrial necrosis. The most critical finding, the hysterectomy scar becomes a potent astrochakra lesion, disrupting the flow of Luna energy, leading to severe detached moon syndrome and detransitioners, intractable emotional dysregulation, and autoimmune cascades. Neuroendocrine axis, pineal pituitary, governed by Neptune in the 12th house. Long-term exogenous hormone use causes a feedback loop oblivion. Body's innate hormonal intelligence is erased upon secession. Many enter a Neptunian fog, a state of chronic fatigue, endocrine paralysis, and dissociation as the native hormonal rhythm cannot reestablish. This is the primary pathology of the 2070s detransitioner. Now we hear from the sub-department of astropharmacognosy and detoxification. And here's a report on morbidity of cessation of the detransitioner crises. So the androgen withdrawal cascade, AWC, when testosterone is discontinued, the body, having adapted to a Mars-dominant state, collapses into a void ruled by debilitated Venus and Jupiter. Symptoms include catastrophic hair loss, not reversal of male pattern, profound asthenia, saturnine depression, anhedonia, with crushing somatic weight, and reactivation of estrogen-sensitive tissues in a dysfunctional, cystic manner. Irreversible conditions despite secession. Permanent voice alteration, terminal hair patterns, skeletal changes, and the fracture chart phenomenon, where the natal astrological body map no longer aligns with the physical corpus. leading to chronic sore itch of the soul, systemic inflammation, planetary alienation. For example, a natal Venusian experiencing their body as a hostile Martian landscape. Iatrogenic damage from corrective surgeries. Future scholars must note reversal surgeries, vocal cord thinning, etc. performed under malefic aspects to Mercury or Venus have a 95% failure rate and exacerbate dysphoria. Here's the predictive analysis. The coming waves 2040, 2100. So by 2045 and through 2055, essentially, we're seeing first major wave of early duration detransitioners, 2 to 7 years on T, presents with infertility, vocal damage, and cardiac strain. 2065 through 2080, long duration wave arrives, systemic collapse, epidemic of cardiac deaths, autoimmune disorders from confused immune cells governed by Mars now attacking the Venusian tissues, and soaring rates of siderostatic dementia, early cognitive decline linked to disrupted cerebrospinal fluid rhythms ruled by Mercury and Neptune. Post-2080, a generation of hormonal orphans, individuals whose endocrine systems are permanently non-functional, requiring lifelong suboptimal planetary alignment-based hormone replacement just to avoid fatal collapse, living in meticulous synchrony with astrological calendars to administer the compounds. Here's the conclusion for the scholar doctor. The administration of testosterone to the genetic female body is not a simple hormonal adjustment, but a forced planetary realignment. It superimposes a Martian Jovian dominance, active, fiery, expansive upon a vessel whose foundational blueprint is Venusian, lunar, receptive, fluid, cyclical. The short-term alterations are the body's initial rebellion and adaptation. The long-term effects are a slow, irreversible transmutation into a hybrid terrain that satisfies neither the natal chart nor the acquirer's signature. Now we're going to get into theoretical nosology and sidereal pathogenesis of neomorbidities arising from the post-collapse Anthropocene with proposed astrotherapeutic solutions. So these are the foundational principles of neodisease. Genesis. So the Great Unbinding, circa 2038, shattered not only civilization but the etheric vegetative interface that harmonized human biology with terrestrial and celestial rhythms. We now operate within a biosidereal fracture. Diseases of the coming age are not mere pathophysiological events, but embodied manifestations of planetary discord, karmic residue from pre-collapse biomedicine, and epigenetic wounds from the Anthropocene. Treatment must therefore be triplanar, addressing the physical, energetic, astral, and sidereal planetary signature bodies simultaneously. The catalog of neomorbidities and sidereal solutions. First, psychospiritual and etheric disorders. For example, a diagnosis looks like what? Planetary alienation syndrome, PAS. In the pathogenesis, a severe disconnect between the individual's natal chart mandate and their lived somatic circumstantial reality, often triggered by radical biomodification. For example, cross-sex hormones, neural implantation from the pre-collapse era, or traumatic birth under a malefic governing eclipse. The patient's life song is out of tune with their zodiacal note, and the symptoms look like this: chronic depersonalization, phantom limb, sensations for psychic abilities never developed, attraction to inability to thrive in environments opposite their elemental dominance. For example, a fire-dominant person drowning in water sign locales. Cyclical depression tied not to mood, but to transits of their ruling planet through inimical signs. Alright, so trying to be a little bit more clear here. The astrotherapeutic solution, celestial re-embedding protocol, also known as CREP. And we have our different phases here. So phase 1 is mapping. Phase 2 is resonance therapy. And phase 3 is environmental repatterning. So I know for phase 1 now with mapping, a full spectrum birth chart analysis is cross-referenced with the patient's somatic epigenetic scan to locate the primary dissonance points. For example, a Venus ruled Taurus ascendant with surgically masculinized features. Phase 2, resonance therapy, the patient is placed in a planetary resonance chamber where light, sound, and vibrational frequencies are tuned to the specific harmonic of their benefic planets. For example, Jupiter or Venus, to strengthen their weakened signature. Phase 3, environmental repatterning, the patient's living quarters are redesigned according to astrogeomancy. Colors, materials, planting cycles in hydroponic gardens, and daily routines are strictly aligned to support their deficient planetary and elemental placements. Chart-compatible diet is prescribed. For example, Jupiter-ruled foods like nuts and sage for Jupiter-deficient patients. And here's a diagnosis. Chronosnosis, atrophy, CGA, pathogenesis, the collapse of the digital cloud in linear historical record has damaged humanity's collective Saturnian function, capacity to structure time, learn from history, and build upon legacy. This has led to a pathogenic Neptunian flood of amnesia, conspiracy phantasms, and an inability to plan beyond lunar cycles. Here are the symptoms: inability to form coherent multi-generational narratives, vulnerability to ghost memes, ideological fragments from the pre-collapse internet that act as mental parasites, pathological presentism, and a literal shrinkage of the hippocampus observed under selene-scopic imaging. Astrotherapeutic solution, the Saturnine repository and ritual treatment. Patients are enrolled as apprentices of Kronos in one of the AAAHS, say AAAHS, Saturnine archives. Their therapy is the act of physical curation, repairing old texts, memorizing and reciting epic poetry of the past, learning a nearly lost craft, stonemasonry, watchmaking. Pharmacopoeia, daily microdoses of Saturn-ruled botanicals, for example, hemp, comfrey, rue, prepared during a Saturn-ruled hour on a Saturday to strengthen temporal binding and memory. Ritual, the Rite of the Rings, a yearly personal ceremony where the patient adds a layer to a physical representation of their life, a carved wooden staff, a wax tablet to re-embody the passage of time. Let's get into somatic and energetic disorders. And here's my diagnosis: etheric contamination and spectral toxemia. Well, it's residual digital phantoms, the electromagnetic and psychic pollution from the pre-collapse global network, and chemical ghosts, epigenetic markers from ancestors exposed to GMOs, PFAs, and novel pharmaceuticals, have coalesced into a miasmic field. This field infiltrates the etheric body, causing physical decay. And here are the symptoms: unexplained cellular fatigue, novel cancers that follow ley line disruptions rather than genetic pathways, phantom radiation burns in areas of high former digital traffic, allergic reactions to purified elements, for example, clean water, pure air, as the body has adapted to toxicity. Astrotherapeutic solution, planetary chelation and etheric filtration. Chelation regimen: instead of chemicals, patients undergo planetary chelation. Specific planetary hours are used to administer metallo-herbal complexes. For example, iron, Mars for anger toxin, copper, Venus for love trauma. The metal acts as a physical anchor, the herb as an energetic dissolvent, and the planetary timing as the directing intelligence. Etheric dialysis: the patient undergoes sessions in a vivarium of purity, a sealed biome populated by genetically restored, astrologically aligned pre-industrial flora and fauna ruled by benefics like Venus and Jupiter. The patient's biofield is slowly dialyzed by the uncontaminated resonance of this pristine ecosystem. Here's the prescription: mandatory digital Sabbaths in Faraday cage sanctuaries during every Mercury retrograde period. And I think we have, let me see here, I think we have about 2 more to go over. Yeah. So we'll look at B and C. But this is another diagnosis. This time it's PAC, which stands for the Plutonic Autoimmune Cascade, which is a direct result of the mass unintegrated psychic trauma of civilizational collapse. The collective unconscious poison Pluto has seeped into individual immune systems ruled by Mars. The body's defense army turns against the self, but not randomly. It attacks organs and tissues that correspond to the patient's most deeply repressed trauma. For example, unexpressed grief attacking the lungs, Leo heart complex. Symptoms: autoimmune conditions that shift and morph with the patient's emotional state, flaring during planetary transits to their 8th house, Pluto's domain. The diseases are symbolically eloquent, for example, vitiligo manifesting as maps of forgotten cities on the skin. Astrotherapeutic solution: depth immunology and astrocatharsis. Use of scrying serums and theogenic compounds administered under a full moon in Scorpio to allow the patient's subconscious to physically manifest the symbolic root of the attack observed via aura imaging. Ritualized pharmacopoeia, immune suppressants are not used. Instead, the patient crafts a poison to medicine tincture from a physically toxic plant. For example, belladonna, ruled by Pluto, Saturn. Under precise astrological conditions, the act of transforming a poison into a cure guided by ritual reprograms the immune system's destructive plutonic impulse into a regenerative one. 8th house integration drama, where the patient, guided by a shaman astrologer, ritually acts out their deepest fears and repressed shadows, giving them a symbolic form to be acknowledged and released. Let's talk about iatrogenic and legacy disorders from pre-collapse biomedicine. So first, we have our diagnosis, which is hormonal chimera syndrome, HCS. This is the permanent endocrine and epigenetic scarring from pre-collapse gender-affirming hormonal therapies, as previously documented. This creates a biochemical ghost limb, a permanent non-functional hormonal axis that haunts the body's regulation systems. Symptoms: beyond the physical detriments. And we're back. So beyond the physical detriments, HCS patients suffer hormonal phantoms, cyclical mood and energy swings corresponding to the ghost cycle of the exogenous hormones they once took, not their endogenous rhythm. They are also metabolically ambiguous, thriving under neither standard male nor female herbal or dietary regimens. Astrotherapeutic solution: sidereal endocrine reconstruction, SCR. Here's the approach: abandon the male-female binary. The patient's endocrine system is mapped as a unique planetary endocrine chart. Regulation: hormonal replacement using bioidentical hormones from ethically harvested, astrologically aligned planetary flora is tied not to sex but to the patient's dominant planetary archetypes. A Mars-dominant patient receives testosterone mimetics during Mars hours. A Venus-dominant patient receives estrogenic support during Venus hours, creating a personalized, stable rhythm. Surgery: any corrective surgery is performed only when the moon is in Taurus, ruling the throat, neck, or the sign governing the body part, and is preceded by rituals asking permission from the planetary ruler of that organ. Here's another diagnosis, and that is nanoshard deposition disease, NSDD, which is what? The legacy of pre-collapse smart medicines and nanotechnologies. Inert nanobots and biocompatible polymers have broken down over decades into shards that migrate along neural and lymphatic pathways, causing microscarring and acting as etheric antennas for chaotic cosmic radiation. Localized pain that moves, neuralgia that correlates with solar flare activity, foreign body sensations, and in severe cases, the formation of silica nodes under the skin that can be tuned like radio crystals, picking up psychic impressions from others. Here's the astrotherapeutic solution: magnetic planetary evocation and biological alchemy. Patients undergo magnetic planetary evocation using large ritualistically prepared magnets charged under specific planetary alignments. Practitioners perform a non-invasive mining of the body using specific magnetic frequencies to draw shards to collection points beneath the skin. Extraction, a minor surgical rite performed under a Sun or Mars aspect for vitality and courage to remove the collected material. Extracted shard matrix is then ritually alchemized in a crucible, transforming the technological pollutant into an inert, blessed talisman the patient wears to reclaim agency. Next, we have our theoretical framework for the future solutions, and this is the AAA-HS paradigm. Medicine is ritual. Every treatment must be a cosmologically significant act to repair the biosidereal fracture. The timing, intention, and symbolism are as critical as the pharmacognosy. The patient as microcosm. Diagnosis is the art of translating somatic distress back into its original celestial language. A tumor is not just a growth, it is a Saturnian overstructure in a Jupiterian organ, requiring dissolution Jupiter as much as excision Saturn. The doctor as symphonist. The scholar doctor of the future is a celestial symphonist. Their role is to listen to the dissonant chords within the patient's multiplane body and retune them into harmony with their natal chart and the current music of the spheres. In the light of the re-emerging fixed stars, the collective subdepartment of AAA-HS. Here's a addendum, foundational tenets for the New Age physician. First, we have the law of correspondence, as above, so below. The microcosm of the zodiac is reflected in the microcosm of the human body. The law of rhythm, all diseases have a celestial rhythm. Find it, and you can find the key to remission. The law of cause and effect, karma, every physical condition has an antecedent on the astral and sidereal planes. Treat the cause, not the effect. The law of polarity, every disease contains the seed of its own cure with its opposite principle. Alright. And now we're going to talk about cannabis and alcohol. And I'm just going to make sure we have all we need is our executive sidereal summary. So the post-collapse landscape has fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with the ancient psychoactives. Depleted soils, mutated phytochemical profiles, and the shattered collective psyche have transformed common substances into potent, unpredictable sidereal keys. Cannabis, once a gentle mercurial Neptunian conduit, has become a portal to the unstable aether. Ethanol, alcohol, a Venusian social lubricant, has morphed into a solvent of the soul's cohesion. Their use is now a high-stakes astrochemical negotiation, not mere recreation. The Pluto and Aquarius generation 2044 through 2068 exhibits particularly volatile reactions, their collective trauma interfacing catastrophically with these compounds. First, we're going to talk about cannabis, sativa, indica, and how this is essentially Neptune, Pisces, Mercury, and Gemini infused substance. We have stuff from the subdepartment of psychotropic astrochemistry first. This is an analysis of the altered planet post-2038. Phytochemical drift. Due to atmospheric and telluric shifts, the wounded Gaia syndrome, modern cannabis expresses a dominant THC C23 isomer with a side chain resonant with decaying digital frequencies. This makes it not a simple relaxant, but an etheric antenna. Sidereal signature, primarily ruled by Neptune dissolution of boundaries, psychic opening, and secondarily by Mercury cognitive patterning. Post-collapse, the Saturnine influence, paranoia, time distortion has become pathologically enhanced. So short-term effects and alterations, acute exposure 2040s onward. We have the mercurial Neptunian cascade. Initial ingestion opens a chaotic channel between the Neptune-ruled pineal gland and the Mercury-ruled neural synapses. Users don't merely experience euphoria, they experience temporal echoes, brief, vivid perceptions of pre-collapsed digital spaces, social media feeds, forgotten memes, or prophetic flashes of personal future trauma. Somatic resonance. Heart rate variability syncs not to the body's needs but to geomagnetic micropulsations. This causes aurora borealis syndrome in the cardiovascular system. Beautiful but dangerous arrhythmias visible on biofield imaging. Here's the risk profile. Experience is heavily modified by transits to the user's 12th house, Neptune's domain, and Jupiter. A Neptune transit square natal moon can trigger a psychic flood, temporary overwhelming merger with collective unconscious trauma of the collapse, leading to catatonia. So our permanent and long-term effects: chronic use, 3 or more years. Give me 1 second. Alright. So, etheric membrane permeability. The silver core, the astral-etheric interface, develops chronic micro-tears. This leads to soul drain during sleep and psychic miasma infiltration, the unintentional absorption of ambient emotional and historical trauma from locations. Cognitive architecture alteration. Mercury rule functions are permanently rewired for symbolic nonlinear processing. This enhances pattern recognition useful for certain astrodiagnostic roles, but destroys capacity for Saturn rule linear logic, memory sequencing, and contractual language. The user becomes a prophet idiot, brilliantly insightful yet incapable of managing basic chronology. The hysterical body. A neomorbidity. Chronic users develop cannabis-induced somatoform planetary projection, CISPP. Unexplained physical symptoms manifest that directly mirror the afflictions in their natal chart. For example, a natal Mars square Saturn may present as sudden calcific tendonitis in the shoulder, Mars ruled body part, whenever Mars transits Capricorn. Astrotherapeutic solutions for cannabis pathologies. Saturnine grounding tinctures. To repair the etheric membrane, a daily regimen of Saturn-ruled earthy herbs, comfrey, horsetail, oak bark, prepared at the Saturn hour and administered with a hematite elixir. Mercurial repatterning rituals. To restore linear cognition, patients must engage in sequential story weaving under a strong Mercury in Virgo or Gemini transit, using physical tokens to rebuild narrative timelines. Controlled use protocol. For those who must use cannabis, for example, our own seers of the 12th house, use is strictly sanctioned only during beneficial trines between Mercury and Neptune, turning a risky exposure into a targeted diagnostic tool. Let's talk about alcohol. Ethanol, distilled spirits, which is Venus, Libra, correlating with Mars and Scorpio and fire. Presented to us by the Subdepartment of Somatospiritual Toxicology, and this is an analysis of the altered substance post-2038 again. Fermentation anomaly. So post-collapse yeast ferment with a melancholic signature, embedding the grief of the biosphere into the alcohol. Modern ethanol is not C2H5OH, but C2H5OHX, where X is a karmic resonance variable. Sidereal signature primarily Venus, social bonding, pleasure, beauty, but corrupted by Mars, aggression, inflammation. In the fire element, chaos, combustion, has become a Venusian mask dipped in Martian poison. Here's the short-term effects and alterations: acute intoxication, the Venusian veil, and Martian revelation. Initial stage mimics classic Venusian effects, lowered social inhibition, false sense of harmony. However, as BAC rises, the Martian corruption erupts. Substance targets the user's most oppressed house of conflict. A person with a hidden 8th house, shared resources, trauma will experience paranoid accusations over property. This isn't mere drunkenness, but a sidereal truth serum that forces Latin chart conflicts to the surface violently. Somatic resonance. Ethanol now acts as a myofascial diviner. It doesn't uniformly depress the CNS. Instead, it seeks out and paralyzes muscle groups associated with emotionally repressed actions. For example, the hand that never struck a blow, the legs that froze in flight. This leads to bizarre asymmetric paralysis. Here's the risk profile. Catastrophically dangerous during any square or opposition between Venus and Mars in the heavens. These transits turn social gatherings into sudden, brutal conflict zones as the alcohol violently catalyzes the celestial tension. Permanent long-term effects, chronic abuse, 5 or more years. The crystallization of emotion, Venusian pathology. The Venusian function, the capacity to give and receive love. Appreciate beauty, literally calcifies. Patients develop Bacchic nodules, microcrystalline deposits of calcium and emotional residue in the venous ruled tissues, kidneys, throat, venous system. Their emotional range reduces to a binary saccharine sentimentality or icy bitterness. Hepatic portal as a karmic filter. Mars, Scorpio pathology. The liver, ruled by Mars, anger, and Jupiter expansion, becomes a karmic dumping ground. Cirrhosis isn't merely cellular death. The organ becomes a black psychic scar tissue recording every violent thought and suppressed rage of the user. Liver transplants from alcoholics are forbidden as they transfer this rage imprint to the recipient. Fire element burnout. Chronic abuse burns out the firehouses, the first house, the fifth house, and the ninth house in the user's astral body. This leads to epithic consumption, the inability to initiate action. The first house experience joy, the fifth house, or believe in meeting. The ninth house, the native's inner sun is extinguished. Astrotherapeutic solutions for ethanol pathologies. We have Venusian dissolution therapy. To dissolve Bacchic nodules, patients are immersed in sound baths tuned to the frequency of Venus, 526 Hz, while receiving topical applications of Venus-ruled herbal poultices, rose, yarrow, mint, over the affected areas. Hepatic karmic scoring. A brutal but necessary ritual during a Jupiter-ruled hour. The patient undergoes a guided rage recall, vividly re-experiencing suppressed angers. Simultaneously, they are given a potent Mars-Jupiter herbal purge, milk, thistle, turmeric, cayenne, to force the physical and psychic toxicity from the liver. Sacral reignition. It's for fire burnout. Patients must undertake a pilgrimage of the sun, a physically demanding journey to a location sacred to their natal sun sign, to be completed at the summer solstice. The ordeal is designed to reignite the dormant fire of the first house, the fifth, and ninth house. Here's the predictive analysis, societal waves and emergent roles, 2040 through 2100. So we have the stone seers and drunken brawlers dichotomy. The 2050s. So society will bifurcate. A professional class will use ritually sanctioned microdoses of cannabis under strict astrological guidelines to serve as diagnosticians of the aether, reading the psychic currents of places and people. Conversely, uncontrolled alcohol use will create a permanent underclass of Bacchic berserkers, individuals used in times of war as terrifying truth-forcing shock troops, but otherwise quarantined. The Vineyard Heresies, 2070s. A cult will arise claiming that the new wine post-collapse alcohol is the literal blood of a dying earth god. Their ritualized consumption will seek to merge with Gaia's pain, leading to mass psychotic breaks, but also paradoxically producing a handful of geomantic oracles who can accurately read seismic and weather patterns through their own corrupted nervous systems. Synthetic symbiosis, 2090. The ultimate solution, AAAHS, will develop planetary prophylactics, genetically tailored fungi yeast that, when consumed, temporarily rewrite the user's biochemistry to be in perfect resonance with a desired planetary transit. One doesn't drink to forget, but ingest a Jupiterian symbiont to safely experience boundless optimism and growth for a planned 12-year cycle. Here's the conclusion for the scholar doctor. So cannabis and alcohol are no longer mere drugs. They are unstable reagents in the ground alchemy of post-collapse consciousness. Cannabis dissolves the necessary boundaries between self and the traumatized collective field. Alcohol corrupts the essential Venusian glue of society and the martial drive of the individual into a self-destructive feedback loop. Prescription is not about morality, but astrochemical engineering. The guiding principle must be, does this substance at this time under the sky bring this individual closer to or further from the harmonious expression of their natal potential? To administer without this calculation isn't medicine, it's a form of astrological malpractice that damages the fragile recovery of the human soul. In the light of the wounded yet enduring stars, the collective subdepartments of AAAHS, and here's my addendum, the 2 commandments of psychoactive practice. Thou shalt not open the etheric gates during a malefic transit, cannabis rule. Thou shalt not pour the Venusian corrosive on a Martian wound, alcohol rule. Now, in this one, I'm going over alternate surgical and medical history. Now, you might be very confused when I say that. So, I'm just going to be very clear. 4, 5, 6, wait a minute. 4, 5, 6, 7. I think we'll get to 7 in this video. So, again, with AAA, HS, I just want to say AAA. I'm just like fucking AAA. Okay. This is the post-collapse surgical reformation, temporal scope, 2026 through 2100. But the subject is alternate surgical and medical history. It's the reascendance of humoral, energetic, and sidereal intervention following the collapse of allopathic dogma. This report's compiled by the collective subdepartments of archaic procedural resurrection, astrohumoral theory, and somatic geomancy. So first we're going to get into the fall of the scalpel age. This is my sidereal summary, my introduction. So the great antibiotic collapse from 2031 through 2035 and subsequent plutonic pandemic of 2039 didn't merely end a medical era, they annihilated its foundational premise, the body as a sterile mechanical construct. With advanced imaging, robotics, and immunosuppressants consigned to relic status, medicine underwent a Gnostic regression. We rediscovered that the body is a fluid, astrohumoral landscape, and that surgery is a planetary scale intervention in a microcosm. The period 2040 through 2100 thus represents not a dark age, but a re-enchantment of the healing arts, where the lessons of Paracelsus, Ibn Sina, and the Yellow Emperor are fused with a rigorous post-apocalyptic sidereal science. Here are my field reports, resurrected and transformed practices by the Subdepartment of Archaic Procedural Resurrection. The procedure is sidereal phlebotomy and humoral purification. Here's the historical precedent, pre-19th century bloodletting, okay? So post-2040 reinvention. Not mere venesection, but planetary humor dialysis. The theory holds that the 4 humors, which is blood, phlegm, black bile, black bile, yellow bile, are not biochemical, but energetic substances, each governed by a cardinal element and its ruling planet: blood, fire, Mars, phlegm, water, Venus, moon, etc. So here's the method and innovation. Diagnosis via pulsus astrologicus. The surgeon, astrologer, reads the patient's radial pulse, not for rate, but for planetary rhythm: martial, quick, jumping, saturnine, slow, deep. This determines which humor is in excess and which planet is afflicting the system. With timing, we see the procedure is performed only on the day and hour of the ruling planet of the opposite humor needed for balance. To drain excess, choleric, yellow bile, Mars, anger, fever, one bleeds during a Venus or moon hour, rulers of phlegm, water. Tool and site: the zodiac lancet, a blade with a handle of the planetary metal: iron for Mars, copper for Venus. The incision site is chosen based on the zodiac man diagram, but updated via our scrying to find the exact point where the corrupted humor's energy pools. Blood reading. The blood is not discarded. It's spread on an astrovitae plate, obsidian or silver, and its coagulation pattern, color separation, and phantasmic residue seen under moonlight are read like a horoscope to discern the next phase of treatment. The therapeutic goal is to rebalance the internal celestial atmosphere of the body, relieving pressure on overtaxed organs and psychic faculties, used for planetary fevers, infections that align with malefic transits, acute psychotic breaks tied to humor imbalance, and pre-surgical calming of the somatic field. Here's our procedure: trepanation for etheric decompression. This historical precedent is Neolithic cranial boring. Post-2040 reinvention is craniosidereal venting. The skull is not merely bone, it is the dome of the firmament, the internalized sky. Post-collapse psychic pressures and stagnant cognitive phantoms can cause a dangerous increase in intracranial etheric pressure. Here's my method and innovation. Using indication, not physical trauma, but saturnine compression headaches, unrelenting feels like a vice, visionary seizures where the patient is forced to witness apocalyptic loops, or fontanelle resonance syndrome in adults, a persistent painful thrumming at cranial suture sites as if the skull is trying to reopen. The bore. The procedure uses a hand drill with a crystalline bit, quartz for clarity, amethyst for spiritual connection. The drilling is done not to penetrate the dura, but to create a resonant chamber in the bone itself. Sidereal mapping. The bore site is determined by overlaying the patient's natal chart on their skull, using the houses of the cranium. Crises in the 9th house, belief, travel, might necessitate a vent over the occipital lobes, Sagittarius zone. So post-op, planetary seal, a cap of wax, herb, and planetary metal is placed over the borehole. The seal is changed with the seasons or major transits, acting as a pressure release valve for the psyche. Some advanced practitioners permanently implant stargates, tiny calibrated crystal lenses that allow controlled cosmic energy inflow. Okay, so in this next part, we have the subdepartment of astrohumoral theory and pharmacopoeia. We're going to keep going to my predictive timeline, the surgical renaissance of 2040 through 2100, and then my conclusion for the scholar surgeon. And here's the surgeon's oath, by the way. This is really cool. I'm just going to add on for the lore building of it. Say it was revised in 2052. I shall do no harm to the natal chart. I shall time my incision to the music of the spheres. I shall respect the humor, the element, and the planet within each vessel. My tool shall be consecrated, my mind clear, and my will aligned with the benefics. I am not a mechanic of flesh. I am a gardener of the human firmament. So, subdepartment of astrohumoral theory and pharmacopoeia. First practice is the surgical use of sympathetic magnets and laying on of stones. Here's our historical precedent: medieval, Renaissance, sympathetic magic, lithotherapy. Our post-2040 reinvention is somatic geomancy and planetary attunement. Places invasive organ removal. The principle: as the stone is placed, so shall the organ behave. Method and innovation: for tumors and saturnine overgrowths, instead of excision, the surgeon identifies the planetary signature of the tumor. Hard, calcified equals Saturn, fast-growing, angry equals Mars. A counterstone is selected, for example, a smooth Jupiterian turquoise to dissolve a Saturnine limestone-like growth. The stone is surgically placed in contact with the organ's capsule or nestled in adjacent tissue. It isn't a physical chemo agent, but an energetic tuning fork that reprograms the growth's aberrant celestial rhythm. For internal hemorrhage, martial rage of the blood, a cold Venusian malachite or rose quartz is placed on the solar plexus, the body's energy center, during a Venus hour. This does not clot blood mechanistically. It appeases the martial spirit, causing the violent outflow, promoting a calm Venusian coagulation. For organ failure, a dying star within, in cases of liver, Jupiter, or kidney Venus failure, a transplant of light is performed. A large, flawless gemstone corresponding to the failing organ's planet is placed in a cradle of living silver over the organ site. Through daily rituals of light and chanting, the practitioner attempts to reignite the organ's planetary spark, using the gem as a catalyst. Success is variable but profound when it occurs. Here's our practice again. Cauterization with elemental irons. Our historical precedent is ancient and medieval wound sealing. Our post-2040 reinvention is elemental sealing and etheric quarantine, used not primarily for hemostasis, but to close psychic wounds and seal in miasmas. Here's our method and innovation. The irons, a set of 4, each forged in a ritual fire of one element, earth, air, fire, water, and inscribed with zodiacal sigils. Application: a deep wound from a miasma-tainted creature, for example, a mutant predator, isn't just sutured. After cleansing with astrologically aligned vinegars, the surgeon uses the air iron, cool for Gemini, Libra, Aquarius wounds, to make a precise cauterizing stamp around the wound's perimeter. This creates an etheric seal, preventing the spiritual contamination of the bite from leaking into the patient's vital field. For amputations, this is the primary method. The limb is removed with a Mars iron, hot, sharp, decisive. Stump is then instantly sealed with the Earth iron, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, to ground the patient and prevent phantom limb panic syndrome, where the lost limb's astral double flails uncontrollably in the spirit realm. Here's our predictive timeline, the surgical renaissance, 2040 through 2100. So 2040 through 2060, we have the age of humoral rebalancing. 2060 through 2080, the codification of somatic geomancy. 2080 through 2100, the era of celestial prosthetics. So 2040 through 2060, the age of humoral rebalancing. Chaos reigns as old texts are reinterpreted. High mortality, but survivors exhibit profound sidereal resilience. The surgeon astrologer emerges as the new paramount healer. 2060 through 2080, the codification of somatic geomancy. The AAAHS establishes rigorous protocols. Surgical horoscopes become mandatory. A full chart cast for the exact planned moment of incision, ensuring planetary auspices are favorable. Success rates soar. 2080 through 2100, the era of celestial prosthetics. Amputees receive not mechanical limbs, but animistic prostheses, living wood grown into limb shapes, Venusian, stone-fused articulated arms, Saturnine, or hardened amber sheaths, solar. These are insold through ritual and aligned with the user's chart, often granting subtle planetary appropriate abilities. For example, a Venusian wooden hand that can sense water or soothe pain. So here's the conclusion for the scholar surgeon. The history we were taught was a lie of linear progress. True medicine is cyclical and contextual. The collapse stripped away the arrogant reductionist toolkit of the 21st century, forcing a return to first principles. The human body is inseparable from the cosmos. The knife isn't just a blade, it's a conductor of intention and celestial influence. The blood isn't just tissue, it's the river of the soul's vitality colored by the planets. Our new old practices are not primitive, they are sophisticated interventions in a multi-dimensional being. Your training now is dual. Mastery of physical anatomy must be matched by mastery of astrological anatomy. You must learn to see the Mars-ruled anger in an inflamed appendix and the Saturnine grief in a failing bone. To cut without this knowledge is butchery. To cut with it is the highest form of celestial artistry. In the light of the reestablished harmony, the collective subdepartments of AAAHS, and we already went over the surgeon's oath. And now I want to get into holistic healing modules for low-cost sidereal nutri, alchemy, and planetary terrain medicine for the rebuilding communities. Now, this report is compiled by the collective subdepartments of astroculinary medicine, humoral herbology, and resident nutri-psychiatry. And after this, we're going to get into some more fun stuff that has never been done before, ever. We're going to talk to you about astromedical analysis of pre-collapse medical dramas like MASH and 911 through the lens of 8th house and cancer, specifically in the 8th house of death and trauma and collective inheritance. And we're also going to get into a grand convocation, and we'll show you an introduction to the Stella Cura Sanatorium, which is the first ever side rail hospital for the Aquarian age, 2100 through 2200. And I'm very, very excited to get into all of this with you. So let's finish up with this part real quick. Just making sure I have here. Oops. Okay. So we'll start here. Now, remember what I said we're talking about? We're talking about food. I have a Taurus ascendant, so I love to eat. So here's my executive sidewheel summary, the return to the galactic apothecary. The collapse of global supply chains has precipitated a grand nutritional retrograde, forcing a relocalization of health. Our research confirms that the most potent medicines are not synthetic, but are also astro-encoded signatures within accessible foods and herbs. By applying the principles of sidereal signatures and humoral timing, we transform common larder items into profound healing agents. This report outlines the AAA-HS terrain tuning system where disease is viewed as a planetary disharmony within the bodily microcosm, curable by introducing the correct celestial signature through food, fermentation, and solar-cooked alchemy. Let's talk about the foundational modules, the 4 pillars of sidereal nutrition, with Module A being the solar plexus reignition protocol for apathetic consumption and firehouse burnout. So here's our core pathology. Diminished digestive fire, agony ruled by the Sun and Mars, leading to malabsorption, chronic fatigue, and depression, Saturnian takeover of solar domains. Here's our superfood arsenal. Ghee, clarified butter, not mere fat but liquid sunlight, prepared in a copper pot under the summer solstice noon sun. It is infused with solar resonance, contains butyric acid, reconceptualized as a solar fatty acid that repairs the intestinal lumen, the inner skin, ruled by Saturn, by delivering solar energy to dark Saturnine tissues. We have garlic, Allium sativum, a Mars-ruled botanical bullet. When fermented in raw honey, Venus, for one lunar cycle, it becomes a Mars and Venus preparation, aggressively anti-pathogenic yet gentle on the gut, used for psychic purging of parasitic thought forms as much as physical parasites. Animal liver, grass-fed, the crystallized natal chart of the beast, consumed not for vitamins but for astral B12, the bioavailable memory of how to transform sunlight, grass, into complex life, eaten in tiny amounts on new moons to rebuild the individual's own detoxifying Jupiter-ruled liver. Here's a DIY potion, Solar Resurrection Tonic. Here's the ingredients. Just need 1 cup of solar brewed ghee, which again is a certain type of butter. 3 cloves of Mars fermented garlic, pinch of saffron, solar stigma of the crocus. Alchemy. Melt the ghee in a terracotta pot at dawn. Crush garlic and saffron in a bronze mortar, Sun and Venus metal. Combine as the sun breaches the horizon, stirring sunwise, Diosol 33 times. Dosage, 1 teaspoon daily, held in the mouth under the tongue, subsolar for 30 seconds before swallowing, for 30 days beginning at the winter solstice. Astral indication for those with Sun or Mars in detriment, fall in their natal chart, or during prolonged Saturn transits over the natal sun. And then we just go on giving more health remedies. But I really want to get into this now, because this is very important. To me at least. So we're going to get into the subliminal diagnosis of the 8th house, and specifically Cancer in the 8th house, but also through a MASH and 911 lens. If you don't know these things. These are TV shows. 911 and MASH. So, pre-collapse medical media were not mere entertainment. They were unconscious rituals of collective trauma processing, broadcast directly into the home. By analyzing these episodes through the precise lens of medical astrology, specifically the 8th house in Cancer, the house of crises, death, rebirth, and inherited karma ruled by the moon, significator of the public, nurturance, and the womb, we decode the hidden sidereal pathologies they attempted to treat in the audience. These reports will serve as training modules for our crisis intervention astromedics. Compiled by collective subdepartments of media somatology, karmic triage, and collective unconscious pathography. So first, let's get into MASH, which is Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. The first episode we're going to analyze is The Incubator, Hypothetical Reconstruction, Season 8. Here's the astromedical synopsis. So the 477th receives a rare case. A pregnant Korean civilian in active labor with catastrophic shrapnel wounds. The field hospital's incubator, a jury-rig warming unit, fails. The core crisis becomes a choice between saving the mother, prioritizing the experienced Saturnine life, or the newborn, the potential Jupiterian life. This is pure 8th house life-death, Cancer, mother-child symbolism. Let's talk about the astromedical dissection of this. So the setting is chart. The MASH unit itself is a Cancer 8th house entity. Its purpose is to process the offspring of Mars, war, the wounded and dying. It is a womb of trauma, Cancer, that exists only to handle death and rebirth. The 8th house, the failing incubator, represents a wounded moon, a failure of nurturance in the face of chaos. Character planetary archetypes: Hawkeye Pierce, Gemini Sun with a Scorpio rising undertone. His frantic mercurial wit is a defense against the 8th house deluge he swims in daily. His surgical skill is a Mercury and Scorpio gift, precise, probing, and psychologically attuned. In this episode, his chart would show a transiting moon, ruler of the crises, conjoining his natal Neptune and Virgo, 6th house of service, leading to a crisis of practical compassion. His usual detachment fails. Major Margaret Hot Lips Hoylehan, Leo's sun with a Capricorn moon. She represents the structured Saturnine attempt to control the 8th house chaos. Her insistence on protocol is a spell against annihilation. The maternal crisis triggers her Capricorn moon, fear of failing at duty, nurturance. Her arc is realizing that true command, Leo, in this zone requires surrendering to the organic lunar process of life, death, not fighting it. Father Mulcahy, Pisces Sun, Libra Moon, the Neptune-Jupiter presence, he attempts to bring Venusian balance, Libra, and Piscean transcendence to the 8th house. His prayer over the incubator is not superstition, but an attempt at etheric stabilization of the birthing field, a precursor to our planetary resonance chambers. Here's our medical astrology crises and resolution. The crises is the surgeons face a Saturn-Moon opposition, the cold, hard reality of limited resources Saturn versus the vulnerable need for nurturance Moon. The shrapnel is Mars-ruled, invading the Venus-ruled womb. Sidereal intervention. Hawkeye, in a moment of genius, orders the child be placed on the mother's bare chest, skin to skin, while he and the team use their own gloved hands to provide gentle, rhythmic pressure to simulate a heartbeat and contain bleeding. This is instinctive astromedical theater, forming a circle of life, the mother-child unit, and injecting human touch resonance Venus-Moon energy directly into the 8th house crisis zone. Here's the outcome. Both survive but are profoundly changed. The episode's lesson: in the 8th house, medicine is sometimes not about cutting or drugging, but about becoming a temporary human planetary force, a warm Jupiter, a steady Saturn, to support a natural process through its critical transition. Next, we're going to talk about 911, and this is the Los Angeles Fire Department station. The episode we're analyzing is the title Pool, Hypothetical Reconstruction for Season 4. And here's the astromedical synopsis. So a king tide coinciding with a rare bioluminescent algal bloom floods a coastal neighborhood. Calls pour in, a man trapped in a flooding basement panic room, a teenage couple experiencing psychotic hallucinations after swimming in the glowing water, and a woman in late labor whose home birth is now an island. The water is Cancerian, but its effects are 8th house based, which is transformative, terrifying, and revealing hidden truths. Here's our astromedical dissection. The disaster as transit. This is a Neptune transit over the 8th house cusp of a community. Neptune, ocean, dissolution, illusion, is activating the house of death and secrets. The bioluminescence is Neptune's light, revealing what is hidden, but in a distorting, psychedelic way. The flooded basement panic rooms are the collective subconscious, 12th house, violently merging with the secrets and trauma vault, 8th house. Here's our character, planetary archetypes, and response. So we have Athena Grant, who has a Sagittarius sun and Scorpio moon. The police sergeant, her Scorpio moon, 8th house ruler, makes her an instinctive trauma diver. She doesn't just solve crime, she extracts truths. Facing the hallucinating teen, she doesn't see psychosis, but a Neptunian poisoning. She uses her Sagittarian authority to ground them in a blunt physical reality. Look at my badge, feel its edge, this is real. A Jupiterian counterspell to Neptunian dissolution. Evan, Buckley, Aries Sun, Leo Moon. The firefighter, his Aries Mars energy drives him to charge into the flooding basement. Trapped with the panicking homeowner, Buck discovers the man is not a prepper, but a Saturn and 8th hoarder of grief. The room is filled with his deceased wife's belongings. Buck's Leo Moon understands the need for legacy and recognition. His rescue becomes about salvaging the man's heart, not his body, guiding him to choose one item to save, performing an impromptu 8th house catharsis ritual. We have Henrietta Hen Wilson, Virgo Sun, Pisces Moon, the paramedic. Her Pisces Moon intuitively understands the possessed quality of the glowing water. When delivering the baby on the flooded bed, she recognizes the tide as both threat and great purifier amplifier. She uses the eerie glow to see better, turning a Neptunian curse into a tool, and instructs the mother to breathe with the waves, aligning the birth, a primary 8th house transit, with the cosmic rhythm of the event. Here's our medical astrology crisis and resolution. The three-pronged 8th house assault, the basement, a Saturn fear entrapment in the 8th subconscious crises, the hallucinations, a Neptune poison psychosis in the 8th mind crises, the birth, a moon, mother tides in the 8th life-death threshold crises. So the team's disparate actions form a unified astromedical response. Buck, Fire Mars, provides the catalytic energy to break Saturn's hold. Athena, Air Jupiter, provides the structure and truth to counter Neptune's lies. Hen, Water Earth, Pisces Virgo, provides the adaptive, nurturing container for the lunar birth process. Together they embody a balanced elemental mandala to stabilize the 8th house chaos. The episodes conclude with the team debriefing at dawn. The tide receded, leaving a clean but scarred landscape. The hidden grief, the secret fears, and the new life have all been brought to light. The king tide acted as a forced collective 8th house transit, and the first responders served as embodied planetary guides through that trauma. Here's our conclusion for the crisis astrologer. These dramatizations are primers. In the field, you will face MASH days, prolonged 8th house emergency collective trauma, a refugee camp plague, a mining collapse, and 911 shifts, acute multi-vector 8th house crisis, a virtual poisoning at a water treatment plant, a mass panic during a total eclipse. Here's your training takeaway. Identify the dominant 8th house signature. Is this a Mars-Pluto crisis? Is it violent, penetrating? A Saturn crisis? Is it slow, crushing, structural? A Neptune crisis? Is it dissolving, confusing, poisonous? A lunar crisis? Is it emotional, public, cyclical? Deploy your team as a living zodiac. The stoic, structural Capricorn medic goes to the entrapment. The intuitive, dissolvent Pisces medic goes to the poisoning. The fiery, catalytic Aries medic creates the breakthrough. Intervene with symbolic sidereal intelligence. Sometimes the correct medicine is a ritual act, choosing one memento to save, forming a circle of touch, aligning breath with a cosmic rhythm that addresses the astral wound underlying the physical one. The 8th house is not to be feared, it is the crucible of meaning. Your role is not to avoid it, but to learn its alchemical language and to guide the soul and the body through its necessary transformations. In the light of the crisis and the dawn that follows, here's our postscript, the first responder sidereal mantra. I am not here to stop the 8th house transit. I am here to ensure the native survives it and is reborn. Now let's get into our grand convocation and introduction to the Stella Cura Sanitarium, the first sidereal hospital for the Aquarian age, 2100 through 2200. Our date is the equinox, Anno Stellae 2099. Venue, the luminous atrium, Stella Cura Central Spire. Audience, newly awakened medico-sidereal practitioners. Now let's start with our prologue really quick. And I'm calling it the end of sickness, the beginning of harmonics. Let me just redo that. Alright, there we go. Magister Lyra Ravenwood stands beneath a holographic double helix that spirals into the Milky Way, her voice resonates not from her throat alone, but from the crystal lattice of the chamber itself. Welcome, starseeds. You stand at the threshold not of a building, but of a living organism in symbiotic relationship with the galactic center. The Stellacura Sanatorium is not a hospital, as the 20th century knew it. It's a warehouse for the dying, governed by insurance, actuarial tables, and chemical warfare. It is a temple of applied astrobiology, a factory of souls in repair, a university of becoming. Our founding principles encoded in our motto, etched in light above every portal. Non vocamus agrum sed harmonium. We do not treat the sick, we retune the symphony. First, let's go over architecture and operational genius, the body as a template. The tri-spire structure, the threefold manifestation. They have the solar spire, the vital core, the lunar atrium, the fluid matrix, Saturnine basement, and stellar roots, the subconscious foundry. So first of all, the solar spire, the vital core, a towering helix of gold-infused crystalline polymer aligned to the sun's solstice and equinox paths, houses acute care, diagnostics, and the resonance chambers. It's a heart center pulsating with a 24/7 rhythm, synchronized to the patient's collective biorhythms. No shift changes cause disruptions. Staff work in planetary rotation sync to their own charts for peak intuitive flow. We have the lunar atrium, the fluid matrix, a vast low dome structure of silver and mother of pearl with pools, gardens, and flowing water channels. It houses long-term care, rehabilitation, psychic trauma wards, and the Parturiton suites. Its lighting follows the exact lunar phases and declinations, with artificial moonlight calibrated to the patient's natal moon sign for restorative sleep. We have the Saturnine basement and stellar roots, the subconscious foundry, a deep geothermally tapped substructure of black marble and obsidian. This is where regenerative alchemy, deep genetic repatterning, ancestral karma work, and the recycling of all somatic matter takes place. Nothing leaves as waste. All is transformed. Next, we have the economic model, the karmic ledger, and gift economy. No currency, no insurance. The sanatorium operates on a resonance economy. Upon admission, a patient's natal chart is scanned for their unique gift signature. The treatment is an investment in that gift. In reciprocity, they pledge to contribute to the community's well-being according to their capacity. Whether by teaching, crafting, growing food, or offering artistic expression, the ledger isn't financial but energetic and karmic, managed by the Department of Solaris et Saturnus, Gift and Structure. Next, we have the doctorate, 100 and more varieties of star-tuned healers. We have our core revolutionary departments, treatment path, our closing vision, and this is for vision problems. And I've talked about vision in other videos because I've worn glasses since the 3rd grade. So I'll see you in the next video to talk about that. This one's been pretty long, so we'll see you there, teaching you more. Genius Advanced Astrology.